Hello there and welcome back to my channel, Bobo Buns So Vintage Life, if you're joining me again, and a big hello if you're new to finding me. My name's Lisa and I'm a vintage inspired seamstress and a dressmaking teacher. I've stumbled over that. So I teach dressmaking too. Totally passionate about all things sewing. Yeah, there's lots of aspects of it and I'm very passionate and I love to share that with you on my channel. Snippets of life and the vintage treasures that I find. And today I'm going to share with you some of the vintage treasures that I found the other week, plus a few other little snippets and things and where I like to go to shop. So I hope you enjoy. I shall see you back here in a moment. Right, last week I had a date with a friend. We haven't seen each other for a while, and as you know, with the last few years goings on, the vintage markets have been moving online, so we haven't been able to go and have a really good sort of treasure truffle and a rootle around, and not always get into the vintage shops. So yeah, been really missing that, and it's just exciting to be able to get back. And I know for some people they don't have access to vintage. A friend of mine in Northern Ireland says there just isn't anything to buy over there, so I know when she comes over here she'll be very excited. I hope you can't hear that. I'm standing on a floorboard that's squeaking. And I can't stand still. I'm a bit of a fidgeter, so hopefully that squeaking won't drive you up the wall. Right, so yeah, as I was saying, we went off, had lunch and went to a market town near us where there are two fabulous vintage shops. And the joy of either going to a vintage market or a flea market or vintage shop is you never know what's going to be there. When you go to a bricks and mortar shop, you have an idea what you want and you can generally go and get it. But it makes it even more exciting not knowing what you're going to find. And I always have like this kind of shopping list in my head of things that I hope to find. And sometimes, you know, it can be years before I find them, but that mental list stays there ticking away. We went into the first shop and, you know, it was just absolutely full to the rafters. It got a lovely corrugated roof, full to the rafters with, you know, buttons and fabric and toweling and baskets and books and zips and, you know, just literally everything you can imagine. And I was putting aside things that I liked and then I weigh up what I really, really want to take away with me. Two reasons. I don't want to take something just for the sake of it because I'd rather it stay there for somebody who'll really love it. And I've got a budget, as most of us do, so you know, I wanted to make the most of the money I'd got. So in this first shop I saw a roll of Deca Plus fabric, which is this one here. It's a huge roll, you know, really fat roll of it, and I only needed 3 meters because of the width of it, so that's what I've got. Now everything, because this is quite an outside sort of shed, so everything was very sort of foisty, stinky smelling. This fabric was a bit popped it in the machine and didn't know if just one wash, you know, with a bit of detergent and fabric softener would work, and I might have to do some other tricks to get rid of the smell, but it smells delicious now, so I'll be happy to wear it. I don't want to walk around smelling like a foisty old person. I don't mean old people smell, but I mean, you know, just a general term. We say in Norfolk, like, he's a funny old man or funny old boy, you know, just general endearment, and I didn't want to be a stinky old girl. So this has been washed and smells lovely. Now I had a dress very similar to this that a friend found some vintage fabric for me, and it was just an absolute steal, but I've put a bit of weight on because I made it quite a few years ago, so I took the bodice off and I've made the bottom into a skirt. But this rich blue is almost the same, so I thought, great, I can reproduce that everyday dress, so that's what I'll be doing. It was a bit crazy trying to cut it because they didn't have a dedicated fabric cutting table, so I'm just pulling out the roll while the guy holds one end of the metal, you know, like a DIY metal tape measure. He's holding one end of it and I'm just walking away till we get to 3 meters, and then with really blunt, almost rusty pair of scissors cutting across in midair. So yeah, it's a very bizarre bit of fabric cutting, but quite fun. So that's that gorgeous fabric. And in that shop, I also found this delightful knitting bag because I knit, so I'll be sharing some of my knitty stuff with you. Tend to have more ideas than I actually get around to finishing, whereas with sewing I finish. Anyway, this is the knitting bag, and it hadn't got any holes or anything, just beautiful, beautiful fabric. And it's lined with a lovely soft satin. Now this is rather stinky too, so I'm going to undo the hand stitching on this to get the handles off, and then I'll give that a good wash and do any general repairs. So I'm totally chuffed with that. So it's another one to carry around, yet another project of knitting that will hopefully get finished one day. I think, oh yeah, grab some buttons in that shop as well, and very kindly he threw in this book for nothing. So it's the 1960s fashion and dressmaking book. I always get the vintage dressmaking books when I can. I've got some lovely ones from the 40s and 50s. They're just fabulous reference materials, and obviously you get drawings from the period. This one smells a bit as well. Sorry, I'm just I've got to work out, I don't know how you make books smell nice. A lot of my old books from my childhood are similarly as foisty, but yeah. Right, so that was that shop, and then moved on to the next shop, and I was very excited. They had tons and tons of patterns, but I selected two that were my size and I know I'd use. So the first one's this one. They've written on the front, I think it was on the sticker, they put circa 1950s, but it's most definitely a 1960s pattern. I just loved, I'll put another picture so you can see it, because there's a beautiful pocket detail on here. And I love that square neckline, so that's a lovely, lovely dress. And then this beautiful 1950s blouse, and that one's my favourite with the rounded collar. So absolutely love these two patterns. So I like using vintage patterns, and I also use reproduction ones as well, you know, like the ones from Vintage Vogue, blah blah blah, but all the fabulous ones that I really love are, say, from Wearing History. Lauren's American designer, so she'll get the original patterns and she'll grade them up. And actually this dress I'm wearing right now is from one of her patterns, which I've used loads. It's the smooth sailing blouse, so I'll pop some pictures up of the blouses I've made. And hers has the high, you know, turn-up cuff 40s sleeves with the pointed collar. But I've rounded the collar on mine and done a bit of top stitching to give it more 30s feel, and I put in a 30s sleeve with a little band. And then, you know, I shortened it so it can be a bodice for a shirt dress. I don't know if you can see, but it doesn't button all the way down. I've just put a skirt with a side zip on, and then the bodice just buttons to the waist. So I've used this a few times to make shirt dresses. So this is a glorious original vintage fabric from Susie Sharp Vintage, who I like to go to. And I think the buttons were from Susie Sharp Vintage too. I get some fabulous fabric from Susie Sharp online. So at the end I'll put my top suggestions for vintage fabric and patterns, you know, in case you're interested in those. Yeah, this one I bought on the way when we took my eldest daughter to uni in Oxford, and I was sort of trying not to cry, and I was like, you know, and so I distracted myself looking for fabric online, and this was that purchase. So I kind of think of this as her first leaving home kind of dress, really. Anyway, back to the shop where I got the patterns. My friend was holding up this fabric, and luckily she didn't want it. That's the awful thing when you're out with a friend and they see something and then you think, I like that, I hope they don't want it, because if they do I'm going to have to be really good and say nothing and let them go home with it. But no, she didn't want this. And this is just a beautiful, beautiful rayon, and I just love it. It's not a bright red, it's a lovely warm red. There's enough for a dress or a blouse. Really not too sure what I'm going to do, but the thing with vintage, if you see it and you like it, it's one off. You need to get it. You don't always know what you're going to do with it, but you need to grab it then if you like it, and then it can stay in your stash waiting to become something. So what else was I going to say? I'll tell you about the things I've got here. I've told you about my dress. The dress on the mannequin, I think I've told you about, that was from a vintage 1950s pattern that I got online with contemporary fabric. I'm going to make that into a proper dress, you know, with proper vintage fabric. I do like when I'm using an original vintage pattern to use original vintage fabric, and I love using all the techniques. I've got a blog post coming up on Lamazy Fabrics talking about a lot of the 1940s sewing techniques. So I've used a dress, you know, made a dress using all of those. So yeah, that's another real passion of mine. I adore fashion history, you know, and how it feeds into the home dressmaker. And what what was I going to say to you too? One other thing. This has literally just come before I started filming this video. This delightful fabric, again from Lamazy, but there wasn't much left. It was on their new fabric. I mean, honestly, it just feels, you know, when something just feels so soft and delightful in your hand. I believe this is like a linen mix. I'll have to look it up to tell you exactly what it is. It's in this beautiful plummy colour, and I've been looking for just the right fabric to make the Leslie skirt, again from Wearing History, where this smooth sailing blouse is from. So I'll put up a picture because I love how it's got that high central panel. I'm going to do the one without the buttons down the centre. I love that high central curved waistband, and it's flattening. It reminds me of 18th century gowns, you know, when they had the stomacher to flatten you in the middle, and then they'd pin the skirts and the wide petticoats on the side. I'm sure that's what inspired this design. So it's got those ruffles at the side. So I'm going to make the knee length version, and I wanted a really nice plain fabric to try this one out in, and just thought this was just the one. I can see this mixing with a lot of colours really well, and I love there's kind of sort of markings in the weave, so yeah, I love it. I'm really chuffed with that. So that I will be trying out for that. So my other go-tos for vintage fabric shopping are Donna Flower Vintage. If you think back to my title sequence where I'm wearing the blue dress with the red roses all over, that's from Donna Flower. She has an amazing eye and luck in finding or sourcing amazing fabrics, so, and she's such a lovely lady. So I go to her. There's Susie Sharp Vintage, as I've said. My dear friend Teresa, who's the antiques dealer's wife. She's based here in Norfolk, so I love going to her. And then we have Olive Red London. She's great. She'll be at the Stitch Festival in London next week. You've got Missy Mops Fabrics, who's based down in Hastings, and she's starting to do some pop-up shops. I'm trying to think who else there is off the top of my head. I'll probably forget somebody, so my apologies because my brain. And then for patterns, I love to go to Wearing History. There's Decades of Style. Really love Mrs. Depew patterns, and she's got so many, so I literally will put in 1930s dress or 1950s coat, you know, whatever I'm looking for. And then we've got Calypso Fashions, who sells original vintage patterns. I mean, there's loads who sell original vintage patterns, but they're my main ones to go for the original. And then for my vintage, oh, and of course you've got Gertie 18 with their charm patterns for more, you know, recreating the 1950s look as opposed to reproducing the original patterns. And I also love for my knitting, Amy from Poison Girls, her vintage inspired knits just are the cherry on the top to finish off your look. So yeah, I've made quite a few of her knits, as well as I've got my vintage knitting books, which I will show you and talk about another day. So I think that's me done for today on vintage. I think the only other thing I've got to say is I'm rather button obsessed, so yeah, if I see vintage buttons, I have got quite a lot all in the cupboard over there. It's all neatly stashed away. I'll show you that one day. So that's me done for today. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you've enjoyed. Please ask any questions if you've got any, or leave me a comment. I always love to chat, and subscribe, that's good too, so I know that you like watching and you don't miss out on my videos. So I think that's all the housekeeping done for today. I shall see you next time. Thanks for joining me. Bye bye.